Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, what restored access to the Chinese market will mean for the cattle industry. But first, from Pierre Poilievre's lock on leadership to the Premier addressing federal Conservatives and opposition demands for action on health care in our province. Let's kick off the program with tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Donna Kennedy-Glans, former MLA and cabinet minister, now a columnist with the National Post, and Duane Bratt, Mount Royal University political scientist. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with an offer of collaboration.
To discuss how Parliament can quickly reverse the food price crisis, the crime crisis, and the dependency crisis Liberals have caused. I'll bring practical solutions and an openness to hear other ideas and work together to fast-track results.
Pierre Poilievre on reaching out to the Prime Minister for an urgent meeting in the wake of the Conservative Party's National Convention in Calgary over the weekend, where he earned 87.4% of the vote in a leadership review, cementing Poilievre's control over the party. Okay, Donna, a more likable Pierre Poilievre? Did he present a persona that could turn the page, connect with a broader range of Canadian voters?
Oh, it sure seems like a charm offensive in action here. He has definitely changed the tone of his messaging. He's smiling all the time, and the overture to Carney is undeniably something that Carney's going to have to respond to. I am here. Steal my ideas, steal our policy ideas. We're willing to be at the table with you, working with you collaboratively. It's time. It's a crisis. We need to double down. And if there is an election called in the short term, he's prepared the ground for that. So very wise, very astute, and frankly, pretty believable. It seems quite genuine. The other strategy didn't work.
Duane, a more united Conservative Party coming out of this convention? How much do you see the outcome of the leadership review moving the party beyond that window of uncertainty around floor crossings?
Well, 87% is a pretty solid show of support, although there was a lot of managing of this convention, which is not unusual. This happens with every party convention. So, having it in Calgary, yes, every constituency association could send 10 delegates, but the fact that there were 2,500 instead of 3,500 suggests that, well, maybe Calgary and rural Alberta and Saskatchewan sent 10 each. I think some of the more far away constituency associations in Quebec or Atlantic Canada probably sent 3 or 4. So, some of this was by design, but clearly Pierre Poilievre has great control of this party. They didn't talk about floor crossing at the convention, although apparently there were some joke cocktails at the bars mocking floor crossing, but that threat is not gone, and that's a challenge. I agree with Donna that it was a good speech. He got rid of the slogans, the snide nicknames, but the content of the speech was very similar to the election campaign. It was all about, cost of living and crime and immigration and energy policy, and that's perfectly fine. But the absence of discussing Donald Trump, I think, is significant. That's still a concern in Canada on tariffs, on threats of annexation. So, he's got to address that issue at some point, and he didn't during the convention, even if the delivery was very different than what we've seen, a much less combative Pierre Poilievre.
Now, Don, in the wake of the leadership review and the signals of collaboration moving forward, where does that leave Mark Carney and the Liberals? Is there Conservative momentum here the minority government should maybe be worried about, especially if an early election is in fact in the cards?
I mean, Carney can ignore all this, and it's very possible that he will. He has run this government not through the legislature, but through executive orders and edicts. That's his style. That's the way he ran other institutions that he's run. So he may, embrace this and look conciliatory, but he doesn't really have to. And if he has the notion of more floor crossings in the works, and That Michael Mock floor crossing really caught people by surprise. It's left a very big bruise on some of these Conservative MPs. If that's still in the works, he may just be polite, sit down with Poilievre for the sake of sitting down, like he would with the NDP leadership, and he says he already has, and listen and steal policy ideas as they come forward, and continue with the possibility of bringing more people across the floor, or even calling an early election. So I don't really see this as a catalyst for him or an imperative for him to change his strategy at all.
All right. Also addressing Conservative delegates in Calgary, the Premier of Alberta.
For 10 years, we saw a Prime Minister that did everything he could to devastate the West and drive our investment and jobs out.
Danielle Smith spoke on the final day of the convention, showing her support for Pierre Poilievre's leadership while taking jabs at the Liberals, though not the current Prime Minister. She also steered clear of the possibility of an Alberta referendum on separation. Duane, surprised by the Premier's focus on the Trudeau era and that she steered clear of referencing the current PM?
No, I think it was striking, though. She never mentioned Mark Carney by name. But did mention Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, Stephen Guilbeault, great applause lines in the room. She kept referring to the 10 years. While the Liberals have actually been in office 11 years, she's skipping that last year. And the reason she's doing that is she has been collaborating with Mark Carney. They have been working together. The MOU on energy is a clear example of that. So she gave the Conservatives what they wanted, which was a blistering attack on Justin Trudeau, and she just ignored the current Prime Minister because she has to work with them, even if the current federal Conservatives are going to be facing him in an election sometime soon.
Donna, talk of separatism, certainly a bit of an elephant maybe in the room, whether it was the Premier or Pierre Poilievre. How far do you see the Conservative convention going on moving the needle and addressing that contentious issue of Alberta separation?
I think what I heard was mostly chatter outside of the main speeches, and you see it on social media now as well. People explaining what's going on, rationalizing isn't the right word, but more explaining the frustration. Michelle Rempel had a very interesting piece on social media yesterday. Talked about, her support for the Buffalo Declaration 6 years ago. We had COVID, so everything got shut down, and those issues were not resolved. And I think we're seeing that more and more. It's lending viability, credibility, legitimacy in some cases to the separatist push here. And I think Danielle Smith does exactly the same. And as she said in the Premier's gathering, you can't reject what a million Albertans are saying. And also what's going on in Quebec. By the way, her French, where did that come from? I was really surprised by that. Most times when people like her do French, we all go, oh my goodness, is she going to run as Prime Minister? So I was bemused by that and curious.
Yeah, interesting conversation maybe to come on that as well. Time for us to take a bit of a break. When we come back, opposition efforts to put concerns over the state of Alberta's healthcare system on the radar. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. The provincial opposition is taking the Smith government to task for what the NDP is calling a lack of action on the state of healthcare.
It's been over a month since we heard the story about someone dying, a young father, dying in the waiting room, waiting for care at the Grey Nuns Hospital in Edmonton. Since then, doctors, nurses, frontline workers have bravely spoken out. They've showed us that this tragedy was not just a single event, but a symptom of a healthcare system in crisis.
The opposition has launched a petition urging the government to declare a state of emergency. It follows a letter to the Premier from emergency physicians highlighting 6 deaths in hospitals, deaths doctors suggest could have been prevented had the patients received timely care. Naheed Nenshi also calling for an emergency session of the legislature. Don, I'll start with you first this time. To this point, the government has acknowledged the health system's under strain. It's identified a degree of action to address address emergency room concerns. As a former MLA, former cabinet minister, is there enough here to warrant recalling the legislature? What do you see now head Netching the New Democrats accomplishing?
The job of the official opposition is to hold government to account. And so these promises of more hospital beds have to be acted on. We have to see demonstrative responses, and that's good. That's what they should do. I'm very surprised at the use, again, of a petition to do this, petitioning for a declaration of an emergency. Petitions clearly have not worked. It's a tool, it's a political tool that seems like it's been overused, and it frankly hasn't been that effective. So at least with the recall of politicians as the NDP launched in the fall, I don't think this warrants a declaration of an emergency, but it is an issue. I think it's an issue, a longer-term issue across the country. People need family doctors. We need people to go into nursing and medical tech trades. How do we do that? I think that's one of the biggest things we have to deal with as a country. And is that an urgent matter? Absolutely. Is flu season, is that cause for an emergency? I don't think so. I think this is an immediate issue, yes, but it's a longer term issue as well.
Duane, what's to be made of how the government has responded in recent weeks to ongoing concerns over the state of the health system? Surprised it's been left to some of the health ministers to address publicly.
Well, we have lots of health ministers, and I think having the fatality inquiry was a good step. That acknowledgement, I think, was important. We can talk all we want about healthcare and wait times, but when you have someone die in an ER with doctors just down the hall, that's going to raise alarm bells. That's something that Albertans are going to focus on. I agree with Donna. I'm not sure what a state of emergency would look like. You had Raj Sherman on a couple of weeks ago. He was calling for a state of emergency, but he couldn't explain what additional powers that would give the provincial government. What I have been surprised at is I think the Smith government actually has a pretty good counter argument, even though they haven't made it. And they may say, this is why we are restructuring Alberta Health Services. This is why we're bringing in the different pillars. That's why we're promoting some private delivery of public services to be able to change the healthcare system. And it's going to take time to move the ship around. But they haven't made that argument. I'm surprised that they haven't, quite frankly.
All right, we have time for one more topic, and that is the return of some familiar faces to the nation's capital and conversation on risking separatism sentiments.
The desire to have a referendum is very low in Quebec. Don't know what the hell is going on in Alberta.
I didn't sign the petition. So.
Playful banter between a pair of former prime ministers, a conversation Monday, part of a week of activities in Ottawa marking 20 years since Stephen Harper's Conservative government took office. Duane, two former MPs jointly calling on Canadians to stand united in the face of sovereignty threats from Donald Trump. Stephen Harper calling on MPs to work together, saying there's no reason we can't pull the country together. How do you see that message resonating?
I think it's an important message, and it's one thing for Jean Chrétien to say that. I think it's another for Stephen Harper to say that. Stephen Harper is an Albertan. Stephen Harper did help draft the firewall letter from 2001. So having Harper stand for Canada in the face of separatists and in the face, quite frankly, of Donald Trump, I think Stephen Harper has made some critical interventions. And with the passage of time, the years in office from the Harper years look pretty good now. There has been, I think, a rehabilitation of Stephen Harper. He was not popular in 2015. There was a reason he lost that election. But we look back at those 9 years and we look at how quiet the federal provincial scene was and how he helped navigate Canada through the global financial crisis relatively unscathed, I think is significant, is important. I think he is a credible voice on this matter.
Donna, to Duane's point, it's been 20 years since Stephen Harper was sworn in as PM. What weight do you see his voice carrying at this juncture, and how does it fit into the current political dynamic?
It's an important voice, as is Chrétien's. These are our elder statesmen. Harper may not appreciate being called elder, but he is our statesman. These are people we look to for guidance and how to navigate. This is a time where we need those kinds of voices at the table. We need people who have influence over our thinking. Calming voices. This is an imperative. This is important. We need to deal with sovereignty. Harper did a lot to deal with sovereignty in the North. He really, really mapped a plan of action that, frankly, if we'd acted on it in the last decade, we'd be in a much better position than we are right now. So I think it's important for us to hear those voices. These people aren't running for election. They don't have to face, go knocking at doors and get reelected. They can say things differently than elected MPs, even MLAs can speak right now. That's their role. And I am really, really grateful that they are speaking up. I look to others to do the same. I think it's important right now for people to weigh in. This is a existential question for us as Canadians.
All right, folks, we'll have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Michael.
Great to see you.